So on your note sheet, the very first part says turning a decimal into a fraction. We did this yesterday, so what I want you to do real fast, I know you have it on your other note sheet, but I want you to go ahead and copy this down onto the new note sheet. So you're just recopying down how to convert a decimal into a fraction. So we're going to start off with stuff that we already know. We're going to start off with a little bit of a review. So converting a decimal to a fraction. Step 1. Determine the place value of the last digit in the decimal. Step 2. Write a fraction using the decimal without the decimal point as the numerator. And the place value as the denominator. And step 3, reduce. Now, what I would like you guys to do, because we're going to be converting from several different decimal to fraction, decimal to percent, and so forth, underline, I know it's already in all caps, but underline decimal to fraction. That way you know you're going from decimal to fraction. It kind of pulls your eyes to that, or box it, or do something to show that that's your visual cue, that if you need to turn a decimal to fraction, these are the steps that you're going to follow. Now, what I would do, I would have this sheet to my left, if you're left-handed, or if you're right-handed. What I would do, I'd have this sheet to the left, then I'd have my example sheet to the right, because now we're going to hop over to our example sheet. So the very first 2 examples, where it says turn in a decimal to a fraction, we're going to write down example number 1. We'll come back to it. So example number 1, we have 0.204. First of all, how would you read this number to me?
0.204 thousandths.
Good, 204 thousandths. You wouldn't have to say that 0 point. You could just say 204 thousandths. Okay? So since that last digit, we already identified that it's in the thousandths place, that becomes my denominator. Like I said, we did this yesterday. So then my numerator is the number without the decimal point. So do I need to include this first 0 here?
No.
Do I need to include this 0? Yeah, because if I take that 204, I take that 0 out of there, 24 is a lot different than 204. So make sure you keep the 0 in the middle, so we have 204. So there's step 2. Step 3, you reduce. So 204 over 1,000 can be reduced to 51 over 250. Now, you guys happen to get in a situation where you don't have a scientific calculator. Go ahead and put that up for me. What number should you always try to see if you're able to reduce them by? 5 or 2. If you can't reduce by 5 or 2, what's another number that you could try? 3, yeah. Good. All right, let's take a look at example number 2. This first part is. Then we're going to add to it. Yeah. So example number 2. Nick, how would I read this number? Give it a shot. Jemai, you want to help him out? So instead of saying point, what word do we throw in there? So 1 and hundreds. Now, here's my thing though. When we go to write this, do we really need to keep that 0 there?
No. Well.
Yes.
Yes. So we're going to write it. The last digit in my last place value is the hundredths. So my denominator is 100. What's my numerator? 50. Do you guys know the shortcut? If you have your top and your bottom that both end in zeros? Oh, Kelsey, what do you want to add in there? What did I do? What didn't I do? Yeah, I put my 1 in there. Sorry, I forgot my whole number. So when you have your top and your bottom that both end in zeros, do you guys know one of the shortcuts you could do? Yeah, just take the zeros off. So now you have 15 over 10.
You want us to do that? This is your job.
15 over 10, what are they both divisible by? 5. So what's 15 divided by 5? What's 10 divided by 5? So my final answer is 3 over 2. What kind of answer is this? Improper fraction. Now again, you could have used your calculator and it would have reduced it to the exact same thing. Okay, so now we're going to go back to your rule sheet, your step sheet. Okay? So here, you're going to learn to convert a fraction to a decimal. So you're doing a fraction into a decimal. There's only one thing you need to worry about. So in order to turn a fraction into a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator. So divide the numerator by the denominator. So if you have your fraction, you have your numerator, you have your denominator. How I'm going to expect to see your work. You're going to write the numerator divided by the denominator, and you're going to show your answer. Okay? Now, I know it's an extra step. I know that it's really easy just to type that into your calculator and come up with the answer. But I want you guys to show me how you're getting that answer.
Why?
Because I want to make sure that you understand the steps. And because I'm all about showing your work in here. All right, now go back to your example problems. So we're going to be on examples 3 and 4. So make sure you put your examples for turning a fraction into a decimal. So example number 3, you have a fraction. You want to change this fraction to a decimal. So if I want to change a fraction to a decimal, Haley, what do I have to do? Divide what? So your numerator by your denominator. So how you're going to show it, you're going to put your equal sign. You're going to show 4 divided by 5 equals, and when you divide that out, what do you get? Jemiah? Say again, hon? 0.8. 0.8, how would you read that number? 8. What? 8 tenths. Yeah, 8 tenths. Good. All right. Let's take a look at example number 4. So example number 4. We have 21 over 25. Rihanna, how am I going to change this fraction into a decimal?
You divide your numerator and denominator, which is 21 divided by 25. And that'll give you 0 and 40. Wait, no.
Just read me the number first.
Oh, wait. 0 and 84.
0.84 is what you got? So if you ended up with 0.84, how you would read this? Do we all agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
So how you would read that, you don't have to say the 0 and. If there's not a whole number in front of that decimal, you would just read this here. Look at the digit in the last place value. Is the 4? What place value is that in? So you just say 84 hundredths. So 84 hundredths is my answer. Okay? Go back to your other note sheet now. So now we're going to go back to our steps.
Mrs. Whittaker, do you already do this one?
My PowerPoint went slide down. Okay, so now, before we write down our next example, we need to identify what percent means. So when you guys take a quiz for me, what do you hope to get? 100%. So percent means, what do you think? 3 words. Say it again.
The average.
No. Something, blank, blank, 100.
The goal.
Yeah, out of 100. So percent means out of 100. it's going to be important that you remember percent means out of 100, because the next one is we're going to change a decimal to a percent. Oh, no. So when you're dealing with percent, you're going to deal with 100 in some form. Okay? So here we go. So our next one is turning a decimal into a percent. So turning a decimal to a percent. In order to turn a decimal into a percent, there's two different ways that you can do it. The first way is you multiply by 100. So you take your decimal and you multiply it by 100. So this is the first way that you can do it. The second way that you could do it is that you just look where the decimal point is and you move it 2 places to the right. I don't care which method you use. However, whichever method you choose to use, make sure you show me your work. Okay? So you can either choose to multiply by 100 to change that decimal to a percent, or you can move that decimal place 2 spots to the right. Now, if I'm changing a decimal to a percent, what should be on the end of my answer? A percent sign. Do not use the percent button on your calculator. It's not used for that, okay? So don't use the percent button on your calculator. Okay, do we all have this down? All right, let's go to our example sheet. So we're example number 5. So I have 0.24 or 24 hundredths. So I have 24 hundredths. I want to change this decimal to a percent.
Move it over to the right
So-
and then just put 24%.
Good. So one way that I can do this, I find my decimal point. I move it 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, it goes behind that 4. Do I really need to put the decimal behind the 4 if there's not another number behind it? No. So 24, and then what do I put behind that 24? Percent sign. That's one way to do it. So if you choose to move the decimal 2 places to the right, I want to see your work. The other way to show it, you could just take 0.24. What's the other way to change the decimal to a percent? Multiply by 100. So if you take your calculator and take 0.24 times 100, you're going to get 24. What goes on the back of it? Percent. Question. Will I mark it wrong if you do not put the percent sign on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will.
How you gonna show work on the first one?
Just how I did.
Like not the multiply by 100, but on the other.
Just how I showed it. That's how you show your work.
So you really got to lose.
You sure do. Hi, Deontay. My name's Mrs. Lidekin. I've known you since August, and I've expected you to show your work since August. It is now almost March. I'm not going to change. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm not going to change that. You're going to show your work, or I'm going to mark it wrong. Whatever makes you happy. All right, let's go. Example number 6. You have a decimal. I want you to change this decimal to a percent. Not move it to the left. Move it to the right. How many places?
2.
2. So here's where we're going to run into a problem. I'm going to move it once. I need to move it one more time, but there's not a number there. So what am I going to put in there?
0.
A 0. So you put in a placeholder and you put a 0. So when I go to rewrite this, my decimal moved to the right twice. It's now behind this 0. So my new percent is going to be...
5%.
No, don't forget that one. 150%. Don't forget that 1. If you don't want to mess with moving the decimal, take 1.5 and multiply it by what number? 100. So if you take 1.5 times 100, it's going to give you 150. You just need to remember to put the percent sign. Again, either way is acceptable. Just make sure you're showing me your work. All right, flip back to your step sheet. So now we just turned a decimal to a percent by multiplying by 100. Now we're doing the opposite. Now we're going to take a percent and change it to a decimal. So if we're going back from changing the decimal to a percent, now a percent to a decimal, in order to do that, you're going to do the opposite. So the opposite of multiply is divide. So we're going to divide by 100. Or you can move the decimal 2 places to the left. So a percent to a decimal, you can do by dividing by 100, or the second way you could choose to do it is move the decimal 2 places to the left. Now if you have the percent 36%, and I'm talking about moving the decimal 2 places to the left, there's no decimal point up here in this number. So if there's no decimal point in a number, where can you put one without changing the value of that number? Say it again. No, because that would be 0.36. Think of it like this. You're saying put it in the front, or you can put it in the back. Think of it like money. 36 cents or $36. Pretty different, right? So if you want to put a decimal in without changing the value of a number, you're going to put it behind that last digit. Okay? So then we're going to put it behind this last digit, and we're going to move it 2 spots to the left. So my answer is going to be 0.36. Now, when you go to write your answer 0.36, what should I probably put in front of that decimal point? You should probably put a 0. That just helps keep them that way. So let's say that you wrote it like this and then you boxed it. And I'm not going to see your decimal point like that. So go ahead and put that 0.36 in there. And because I'm changing percent to a decimal, I just dropped that percent sign. So let's go look at our 2 example problems now. So example number 7. You have 40%. I want you to change this percent to a decimal by, which step do you want to do first? Say, you want to move the decimal to the left 2 times? So where do I put that decimal point, Haley? Not in front of the 4, because that would change the value of the number. Behind the 0. And then I want to move that decimal point. Which direction? How many times? So when I move it to the left 2 times, it'll end up in front of the 4. So how do I write my answer now, Haley?
I know.
Go ahead. I'm listening. So 0.4. Do I need that 0 on the back of there? You don't have to. You can. Sometimes moving the decimal point to the left can be a little confusing. So the other method that you can use is take your 40%. How do I change? What's another way that I can change a percent to a decimal? Divide it by 100. So you just take 40% divided by 100. When you do that, what do you get in your calculator, Rihanna?
0 and 4. Wait, 0.4.
0.4. That's fine to say it like that. Or you would just say 4/10.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a look at example number 8. So now you have 3.7%. Imagine, how do I change this percent to a decimal?
Don't you do the twice? Do it twice.
Okay, you want to move the decimal twice? Which way, left or right?
This way. Yeah, what?
To the left. So I'm going to move my decimal to the left twice. So the decimal point's already in this one, so I'm going to go 1, 2. What am I going to have to put in front of that 3? A 0. So when I go to rewrite my answer, I'm going to write 0.3 Now, what's all the numbers behind my decimal?
Seven.
Well, 0.07. Good. So that's one way. Beyonce, what's the other way to change this decimal, or excuse me, this percent to a decimal? No, not times it. Divide by what? Percent means out of what number? So divide it by 100. So if you type that into your calculator, Beyonce, 3.7 divided by 100, what are you going to get? Yeah, you're going to end up with the exact same answer. Good. Raise your hand if you can read this number to me. Raise your hand if you think you can read this number to me. Beyonce? Anybody want to give it a shot? Darius? Smith? Nope. Darius Coleman?
37,000.
Yeah, 37,000. You wouldn't have to say 0 and. Now, if there was a 1 there, you would. 1 and. But since there's not a whole number in front of that decimal, you would just read 37 thousandths. Good. Okay, ready? Back to our other side. We're almost done, you guys. We're almost finished. Now, we're still done with percents. Now we're going to change the percent into a fraction. Remember, percent means out of 100. So, in order to change or to turn a percent into a fraction, you're going to write a fraction with the percent in the numerator and 100 in the denominator. So out of 100, and then because it's a fraction, we have to reduce. So what that means, while you guys are writing here, if I have 25%, and I tell you guys I want this percent written as a fraction, all you're going to do is write the percent without the percent sign in your numerator. So it's going to be 25. And if you remember, percent is out of 100. So our denominator will be 100. And then I simplify. They're both divisible by 5. Divisible by 5 again. So it's going to equal 1/4. You don't have to write down the example here because we're going to do an example on the back. Just kind of show you what I'm talking about though. So percent to a fraction, you write the percent as your numerator. Your denominator will be 100 because a percent is out of 100. And then fractions are fun because we always have to reduce. Nope, not right now. All right, let's go to the next 2 examples. If you guys don't get some part of the notes, let me know. I'll go back to them. So example number 9. We have 35%. I want you to change this percent to a fraction. So what's my numerator going to be, Isaiah? What's my numerator going to be? Look at your sheet. Nick, help him out. Yeah, your numerator is just going to be the percent without the percent sign, so 35. Then your denominator is going to be 100 because the percent is out of 100. Last step, simplify. Just looking at this, what's 35 and 100 both divisible by? So what's 35 divided by 5? And 100 divided by 5? There you go. That's your final answer. All right, example number 10. We reduced it. So now you have 72%. You want to change 72% to a fraction. Brendan, what's my numerator? 72. And percents out of 100, so what's my denominator? 100. What's 72 and 100 both divisible by? You can use your calculator to reduce. But what's 72 and 100 both divisible by, though?
3. Well, oh, never mind.
Not 3, but by 2. Okay? So when you reduce 72 over 100, what did you end up with?
18.
18 over 25.
Say it again.
18 over 25.
18 over 25? Good.
Right.
All right, last part. So this last one now, we're going to take a fraction and turn the fraction into a percent. So when I give you guys back your graded quizzes, you know how I always put like 5 over 6 or 10 out of 15? I'm writing that as a fraction. So from here on out, you guys aren't allowed to ask me what percent you got, because you're going to know how to change that fraction to a percent. All right? So to change a fraction into a percent, you're going to have 2 steps to follow. The first step is to turn the fraction into a decimal. So remember, to turn a fraction into a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator. Remember, you have those notes already. So to turn a fraction into a percent, you first have to change it to a decimal. After you change to the decimal, you're going to change the decimal into a percent by multiplying by 100. So you're going to have 2 steps that you have to do in order to solve it. So when I grade a test, and I have, if you took the test and you turned it into me, I have them graded. So your test was out of 160 points. So your total points goes on the bottom. So this is my fraction. This is what somebody scored on their test, 143 out of 160. I want to change that to a percent because you want to know if you got an A, B, C, D, or an F. So what you would do, you're going to first change this fraction, into a decimal. So I'm going to take 143 divided by 160. Now, I'm not going to make you write that answer and then put times 100. So you can take 143 divided by 60, which will get me a decimal. Then I want to change that decimal to a percent. So what am I going to have to do on top of that? Multiply it by 100. So if you do that in your calculators, if you take 143 divided by 160 times 100, you're going to get 89.375.
That's a big one. Wait.
Now, when I give you guys grades, I don't do an 89.3%. So I'm going to round it to the nearest whole number. So I look to the right. Is that 3, 5, or greater? Nah. So it's going to say as a 89, what grade?
B.
Percent, which would be a B. So whoever scored that did rather well. Okay, let's do your last 2 examples.
So you gotta divide, then you gotta multiply.
Yep. So the first thing, change this fraction to a percent. So we're going to do 2 steps here. First thing I have to do is change this fraction to a decimal. How do I change a fraction to a decimal? Numerator by denominator. So I'm going to divide 3 divided by 4. Now, to change a decimal to a percent, I then do what? Times 100. So I'm going to write that all in one step. So I'm going to take 3 divided by 4 times 100. And what do you guys get? And I'm changing it to a percent, so it should be 75%. Good.
Can we do the next one on our own?
No.
Last one. So change the fraction to a percent. What do I do first? I first change that fraction to a decimal. How do I do that, Darius? Say it again. There you go, 7 divided by 8. Then I change that decimal to a percent by doing what? By 100. So if you take 7 divided by 8 times 100, what do you get? 87.5 85%. Now, because it's not a grade, you don't have to worry about rounding. You could go ahead and write it as 87.5%. But let's say that this was what you got in your test grade, 87.5%. It's going to be an 88% again. All right.